Well, let's get going.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out on a wintry night and joining us for the third event of our 24-25 programming season. I'm really excited about our guest tonight. As you know, we've been pursuing the idea of how we can find more joy and wonder and meaning in our daily lives. And tonight we're going to explore the role that poetry can play in guiding us to that experience. And we could have no better guide than the Reverend Canon Spencer Reece. His CV is endless, so I won't go through it all. But he's a graduate of Wesleyan, where he studied with Annie Dillard. He got his master's at the University of York, studying George Herbert. Then you had a stint at Harvard Divinity School, and then another stint at Berkeley Divinity School. So we have a highly educated intellectual with us here tonight. But through it all, he was, and long before becoming a priest, he also spent a lifetime as a poet. And the accolades there are even more impressive. Winner of the Bakeless Prize, awarded by the poet laureate, Louise Gluck. He's won a Fulbright, a Guggenheim, and published in the Paris Review, the New Yorker, poetry, grants. It goes on and on and on and on and on. So we are in very good hands tonight to look at the role that poetry can play in our lives, as it, not only as an art form that we could explore ourselves, though we'll never achieve anything even remotely like you have, but also to kind of see the world through the lens of poetry and perceive it and feel it in that way. Now, I'm going to be quick to add, though, that in addition to all that success that you've had, it has also been a very challenging journey. And I'd like to share with the group that when we announced that Spencer was going to be with us, a monk, a 90-year-old monk at Holy Cross Monastery, sent me an email and said, well, this is going to be really interesting. It's excellent. It's just a world-class mind, but you should also know that he's been to hell and back. And I thought that was an interesting way to describe what I then later discovered in reading your memoir, that in fact you have had a lot of challenges in life that you have somehow overcome and lived through. And so I'll let you tell your own story, but I would actually like to start this evening by exploring that narrative, your journey, the issues that you have dealt with as you found your way to becoming a poet and then a priest.
Sounds reasonable.
Well, you did tell us that poetry saved your life in the memoir and in our conversation, so I think it's an interesting place to start.
Okay. Thank you all for coming this evening. Some from Springfield, Massachusetts, from Wickford, Rhode Island, and from here in this beautiful town where you all live. It's a privilege to be here and to see my old friend, Father Matt Lindeman, who's your priest now here. Oh, there you are. Look at all these people. I love him like a son. I'm very proud of him. How poetry saved my life?
Yes.
That is a true statement. I think that poetry did save my life. What an unlikely thing to have happen to somebody I was in my AP English class in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was a very small, kind of rinky-dink prep school. It was an Episcopal prep school. So I come by this religion, I guess naturally, although my parents were not Episcopalians. They sent me to this school, and in my senior year, I took an AP English class. There was 10 of us in the class. I still remember their faces. I still remember their names, where they went on to college. We were trying to get into great schools, mainly in the Northeast. I went from there to Bowdoin College and then to Wesleyan, like Mark said. And thank you for inviting me and having me. Did I say that already? I don't think you can say thank you enough. I think Master Eckhart said if there's one prayer you can have in your life, it would be thank you. So I'll just keep interjecting that throughout.
Well, thank you for
when I
coming.
have to say, thank you. And thank you to Ethan for all that technological stuff that you've put together over there. When I was in this AP English class, I just got really excited about literature and words. My parents were bibliophiles. We had 10,000 books inside this house where I grew up. It was just like books, books, books. You could barely see my mom and dad. They were very much in love with each other. I grew up in a home with parents that adored each other, and they adored books. And so sometimes it was hard to find them in all these books. They were always reading all the time. My dad was a doctor, he was a pathologist, and my mom had been a nurse at Mass General and raised myself, God bless her, and also my younger brother, whose name is Carter. And I think like my teenage years and my 20s were like the hardest time of my whole life. I hope that's not true for Jonah and Ruthie, that, it was very difficult. I don't know how it was for you, Andrew, but lousy, very, it's almost like we're like Frankenstein, like the hormones start coming in. Remember that? Like, suddenly you're in puberty and there's all these hormones and you don't even know what to do with them. And this in the Midwest in the 1970s was challenging in many ways. And I also grew up in a home with these lovely eccentric parents that were affected by the disease known as alcoholism. And they were incredible people who were also suffering in ways that I could barely understand or articulate. And so I think that a spiritual search, which ended up turning into this uniform and this thing that I do, began in this sort of not religious household at all. It was a bohemian, eccentric, big stress on the arts, and in that class, I started to, it's horrible to say, but I really wanted to die. I wanted the earth to swallow me up. I knew that there was something really different about me that I couldn't articulate. And there was really no one to turn to in 1970. We're talking 1977, 78. You were there, you remember.
Yes, I do.
And either about this issue of the drinking or sexuality. Everybody in here's got some kind of a sexuality, and it's an intimate thing, it's a personal thing, and we navigate it the best way. Eudora Welty said, everybody has a private life, and each one of us navigates it the best way that we can. But certainly, I thought some of these issues, the issue of sexuality, was going to be something I needed to die. I needed to commit suicide, was my plan, which makes me sad to think. I'm so glad I'm 61 and I'm alive, and I've seen so many changes in the world. And I went back to this prep school where there's like, there's like a a gay group, and the kids were all talking about the, the non-binary stuff and the pronouns, and like, the gay thing wasn't even an issue anymore. It was on to something else. And but there was, there were places where they could go and they could talk. And when I went to that prep school, we did tease a classmate of mine named Daryl for being flamboyant and effeminate, and he did go home and he did hang himself. And so that was very much a part of my narrative. And unfortunate, and I wish that Daryl could be here tonight. So I just love poetry, and I can't really explain it. A lot of these things we can't even articulate, right? Like, why do we love church, or why do we love, I don't even know why I love it so much, but I just became completely obsessed and crazy about poetry, and then I just couldn't stop reading it, and I had to read as much as I could. And I also had a crush on my high school English teacher, a woman, and that was part of it too, I guess. We're complicated. And she's been my friend my whole life, and she was just in the church this summer, and feeling still the same.
And that AP English course, was that where the poetry bug really hit you hard? Was there, or was it before?
No, it started there.
Yeah.
It really started there. And then at Bowdoin also, I took a class on Elizabeth Bishop and T.S. Eliot and somebody else, Gerard Manley Hopkins. And I just started memorizing the poems. I just started, I just went nuts with it. And, before my father died in Old Lyme, Connecticut, have you been there? This is not too far from here. I took care of my parents in the pandemic in Old Lyme, Connecticut, and I'd come back from Europe. And little did I know I was going to be sequestered to this one-bedroom apartment with my parents who were in decline. And I would talk to my father in the car because my mother was the talker. And when I could get my father in the car, he would then talk to me. And my father was from the South. He was from Oak Ridge, Tennessee. My grandfather worked on something called the Manhattan Project. He was a chemical engineer and mined the uranium for the atomic bomb. And my father grew up, imagine growing up in that, so it made him kind of shy. And secretive, perhaps, I guess. Not really secretive, but shy. And we're driving around, and it's the pandemic, and it's my dad, who I just loved. But anyway, he said, in his humorous Southern way, he said, and he loved basketball, he loved a lot of things, and he was like, poetry, of all the things, poetry. Why poetry? We had you go to basketball games, we took you on trips to Europe, we showed you all these things, you went to these great schools, like, why that? And I was like, I don't know why, but there was a great love of literature in the house, for sure. And, Louise Glick talks about poetry, the reason that she loved it so, and she was my friend and has gone on to the big poetry reading in the sky now. And she loved poetry because it gave her solace and a private world that she could go to. And outlining that past a little bit, I definitely needed a private world, a world of solace, a safe world that I could go to and dream whatever I dreamed, thought whatever I thought, and that became poetry, and then it just went on and on and on. So, yeah. How did that answer the question?
Yeah, and so how is it that you think that your love of poetry has kind of shaped the way you perceive the world? Is it as an art form? There's so much reading your poems, The language is so precise, and there's an element of surprise often in your poems, and there's a real sense of you're bringing us to the present moment in a way that really just focuses your mind on what you're seeing and what you're feeling, and through your eyes we get to see the world. And so I'm just wondering, whether or not that somehow this art form that you have pursued for your entire lifetime so diligently has kind of shaped your view in a way that it'd be interesting for us to know, because it would also perhaps help us shape ours.
Don't you love him? He's like here every day, right? I mean, I have to say that in preparation to coming here, Mark is one of the few, and I've been doing some form of this for the last 20 years. I can count on one hand the amount of people that took the time to, not that I've written a ton, but he read everything. So that's quite something. And thank you again.
Thank you. Again.
How?
I want to, because I think that you can unlock for us how poetry can actually help us see the world through a lens that brings that element of surprise and wonder into our lives. And that's kind of what we're all hoping we leave here with, is that prism that you see the world through.
Well, Patty Ford and I were talking earlier. She's just taken to watercolors at the Stratford, which is the best senior citizens, you just said, center. Yeah, it incorporates all parts of the human being. I'm going to need to go there soon, so save me a place. Save me a place. We were talking about watercolors, which Patty does, and how when you paint, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you were saying something that I also feel when you paint or when you write, especially I think poetry is really the sister art to painting. They're closely aligned more than nonfiction or fiction, or things that go right and left justified, although a poem can do that too. I think that the precision that you mentioned, and Elizabeth Bishop talks about a perfectly useless concentration, kind of like a meditation or reflection. And in my whole writing life, and Daniel, where's he? Over there, was talking about, he had seen the film about the girls that are little roses, and I just noticed, like maybe last week, that I tend to just be drawn to things or people that I feel the world is not noticing. And so I think that my art life, particularly the poetry life, has been about looking at people that I feel the world is not noticing for whatever reason, whether that's a gay man who's worked his whole life at Brooks Brothers, at the store in the Mall of America. And there's a wonderful line. Do you ever see Death of a Salesman, Arthur Miller, Death of a Salesman? And there's this great line by the wife of Willie Loman. What's her name? I forgot. You probably know. The wife of Willie Loman. At the end, she comes forward to the stage after he's, just his American dream is just shattered. And he, all this build up to this interview that he has, and then it doesn't work. And she comes forward and she says to the world, attention must be paid. Attention must be paid. And I think that's the drive of a lot of the poems for me. with the girls from Our Little Roses, or the Bishop of Spain, who I worked for 10 years in Madrid, the most unknown, unsung diocese on the face of the earth, the poorest diocese in the world, just sort of a laughing stock of a diocese. And yet I worked for this very dignified and lovely man who John has met. So in this third book that came out this year with Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, which was like my absolute dream that I could, because in that AP English class, I studied Flannery O'Connor, and Flannery O'Connor was published by FSG, and even at 17, I was like, oh, that's where I want to go. So I knew early that thing, yeah, I could just keep talking, but maybe you have questions.
Yeah.
J.D. Salinger said
Do you want to read a poem from there?
Yeah, J.D. Salinger said there's nothing more boring than a talking writer. That just...
I think it'd be fun to read something from that collection.
Okay, well, this is a short poem that I just opened to. One of the gifts of my midlife, latter life, was learning a second language, which is Spanish. And my life was all in Spanish for over 10 years, and I was improbably sent to Madrid to work for this diocese that had no money. The salary that they offered me was so low, but I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. And so I did it for 10 years, and one of the things that happened over there was I learned a lot about the Spanish Civil War poets. And Spain is an interesting country to know about in terms of what happens to a country with a dictatorship. And the arts suffered tremendously under Franco. And most of the poets were killed in the Civil War. They were murdered, they were killed. And so our church closed too, the Spanish Episcopal Church, this church I knew nothing about. 4 priests were shot and killed in my office, and their bodies were never recovered. That's the office where I worked for this wonderful bishop. And I became acquainted with these poets that I had not really known about and began to read them in Spanish. And this is a very short translation that I translated of a wonderful poet named Luis Cernuda, who didn't die, but he left Madrid at the time of the Civil War, went to Mexico, and never went back. He never went back. He died in Mexico. And this poem is called Pilgrim. Return, return, a weak man after long years, after a long trip, worn out from the road, craving his country, his home, his friends, a safe kind of love. That man will return. But you, return, go back. No, do not think of it. Keep moving forward. Stay alert, whether you're a kid or old. You're not Ulysses. No one looks for you. There's no Ithaca, and there's no Penelope. This part I just love. So go on, go on. Do not go back. Be faithful until the end. Do not wish for an easier destiny. Your feet will track the unknown, and what's ahead you can never see. Wow, this is a poem from great poet. I encourage you to go out and buy all of his books. Luis Cernuda, wonderful poet, along with Federico Garcia Lorca and Antonio Machado, these wonderful voices from a country that lost its voice through the dictatorship. They lost their voice as a whole country. And when a country loses its voice, you are in trouble. You are in trouble. And from the most unknown, unseen of the arts, But if you lose poetry, in my mind, and maybe I'm crazy and I am a little eccentric, but if you lose poetry, you lose the whole shooting match. And I experienced that and witnessed that. And there's great poets writing now, again in Spain, and now that they have a democracy back. And poetry's like I mean, I'm crazy, I know, but it's like the most important thing on the earth. It's the most indestructible thing also, believe it or not, I think, because everything, this building, the oriental rug, the flowers, our clothes, but this is what lasts. William Shakespeare, Sonnet 18, right? Sonnet 18, remember? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and fair from every fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So, how old is that? That's like how old is this place? 300 years old? It's like really, really old. But that person's alive only because of that poem. So it's kind of powerful. God bless you, Anna.
So that's in part the answer to one of my questions, because at one point in the memoir you said that poetry is the portal to the eternal. And I was trying to figure out whether or not you meant that the poetry itself is a way of sort of capturing a moment in time and for all eternity, or whether it is through poetry that we actually do get to experience the kind of that sort of infinite blank screen of the eternal present. You know what I mean? That there is this thing that we tend to think of time as being a linear, but in fact, there's also the eternity cutting through it all. And that poem brings up that very point, that somehow there is this dimension of our experience that you can capture in words.
Well, I mean, maybe Matt will know because he's smarter than I am. But in divinity school, there was some class where we studied, it's Kierkegaard or Kant or one of them believed, maybe you know, poetry was the closest to God because it required the least amount of materials. You know, you didn't need a canvas like Patty Ford needs when she goes, all the materials, or when you do a play, you need like money, you need people. When you do a movie, you need a ton of money, as I learned firsthand. But when you make a poem, you don't need any money at all. You don't need any money at all. And what I just shared with you, I didn't even need a piece of paper because, you know the story of Anna Akhmatova during Stalin, where she would transfer the poems, another place where poetry nearly died. The house was bugged, so they would come to visit her at her house, and she'd write a piece of the poem to the Russian poet, and she'd start talking about the weather. She'd say, it was very rainy today, and we almost weren't able to get here. And he'd say, oh yeah, terrible weather. While that's happening, she's written down the first 2 lines of her poem to the other person to memorize it. And as soon as he memorized it, then she'd go on to the next part of the weather. Oh, I went to town today. And so the poem would pass from one Russian poet to another by memory. Mm. That's how she transferred her poems under Stalin, where her son died under house arrest. So,
It's like the bards, the ancient world.
or, you know, World War II and Theresienstadt and the Theresienstadt concentration camp, which was such an inspiration for me, where the kids, 15,000 kids died there, but they wrote these incredible poems that we have. We have the poems, so the kids exist, even though they did their best to wipe them out. You can get those poems in a book called I Never Saw Another Butterfly. Very, very powerful book of poetry. Yeah. I could start reciting those too now, but you probably just, maybe there's questions.
Let's shift gears because
Let's
on
shift
that
gears.
note, because you had this amazing experience in Honduras,
I
teaching
did.
poetry.
Yeah, we made this
to
book.
yes.
It's sold out now, but I think you can get used copies of it.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about that because
Yeah.
I mean the way in which you were teaching poetry to these girls, but
Yeah.
also they were writing poetry, and the process of doing that transformed their lives and yours.
It did. It did. It did. I was talking to Daniel about that before we started, and for those of you that don't know, we made a film called Voices Beyond the Wall, and you can get it on Amazon now. It was sold to Amazon, and it was an amazing team of people that came together to make a film. I had graduated from the Berkeley School where Matt and I met, and I wound up in Honduras, and I wound up making this movie. So it wasn't originally going to be a movie. I was just going to go on a Fulbright and teach them poetry, and then I thought, let's make a movie. And I just didn't know anything about anything, but we made this beautiful, 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 beautiful film. I raised the money to make it, and it was an amazing team that came together to make this beautiful film about how poetry saved the lives of these, girls, or gave them freedom. I mean, their lives were saved by being in the orphanage because it's dangerous out there. What do you want me to talk about?
Well, the whole
Or
story
Jim?
and the whole process. One of the things that struck me, there was a moment in the film where I think you even talked to the camera at this point, where you say, and the amazing thing is that every single one of the poems in some way ended up in forgiveness, with forgiveness.
Yeah, it did. That's true. That was wild.
How does that work?
I don't know, it was really crazy. I mean, they really taught me so much that I share with my parish in Wickford, Rhode Island today. Really, they're my theology teachers. They just got that piece of things for whatever reason. I don't know if it's cultural. I don't know if it's being abandoned. I don't know if it's witnessing violence. I don't know. But there was a tremendous amount of forgiveness among those 72 girls for their parents, and particularly the mothers. The mother is so central in their lives when they don't have parents. And it taught me about forgiveness, because I had been very unforgiving and very judgmental and very, very, very judgmental. Yeah, I was the world's moral instructor there for a while, but I just, so much of that, which, to be kind to myself, if you've grown up in a home that's been affected by alcoholism, it's almost like your second nature to become a black and white thinker and judgmental, because you can control things and it's a way to navigate the world. But through a lot of 12-step meetings and folding chairs and making cups of coffee in basements of places like this, I had to take decades to get to that kind of forgiveness that they just seem to have.
And forgiveness of yourself.
And forgiveness of yourself.
Yeah.
And love of yourself, that we're enough. That was a hard one for me too. I suffer from over-functioning. I've got to, do this, do that, and then you're going to like me. And finally, some of that is disappearing from my life, and the message that I'm enough. This is enough tonight. Isn't this perfect? Yeah. It's just all enough. I don't have to, I don't know, redo it or make it different, or, but anyway, I'm learning. I'm a work in progress.
I also love the way that you said that you were with 72 surgeons.
Surgeons?
Surgeons. Who are removing,
yeah.
removing shame.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true, because I still had quite a bit of shame. Not so much about saying I'm in AA, I don't know, where I'm sober and in a 12-step program. At this point, I'd just rather everybody under the sun knows, because it makes my life easier. And but that I was gay was much more difficult for me to say, for whatever reason. I just thought it was I somehow felt I was a tremendous disappointment to my parents. And I loved them so, and they were part of that kind of American dream from the 60s, Jackie Kennedy, the whole, and I just thought that this was going to destroy the ambitious plans for more progress. But I was wrong, and it all turned out fine. But they kind of, they loved me just as I was. And I think finally, in my 60s, I just feel more peace to be me, and it's okay. But I mean, this was hard one. It may sound like nothing to you, but it didn't come to me after my first AP English class at all. It was a long thing, but.
So they healed you, even as they were healing themselves.
Yeah, I know. So I can't do enough for them, or that home, or tell people about it, or how they can help to be a part of it. It is a resurrection factory, and there are 72 girls there who come in many times with bloated stomachs and no teeth in their head. Matt's been there, and it was just real live. It really made the Bible real for me as somebody that didn't grow up really reading the Bible. I was like, this shit is real, and this is it, and this is what it looks like, and it's very powerful. It's very powerful to take an abandoned and abused girl that has been eating garbage and left at a street corner, and to be given some kind of a family, and it's certainly not perfect by any means, by any stretch of the imagination, but some kind of a family, self-esteem, teach them poetry, like that the world is their oyster. That is the source of happiness. I felt, I shared with Dr. Sue, definitely this Christmas at our parish was sharing. All we did, we sang Christmas carols at the nursing home. The doctor stopped in the hallway crying, we're all crying. We're just singing Christmas carols. It was not complicated. It wasn't my idea. Some parishioners said, why don't we go do that? I was like, why don't we do that? And just sharing my time, because I'm so busy, right? I don't have time to go sing Christmas carols. But I didn't listen to that voice, and I went and I sang these things, and I felt so happy. It was simple. And then, we went to Woonsocket, and we gave meatball sandwiches to a girl that's living under a bridge, and that took another hour. But just sharing what you have will make you happy. I'm convinced.
Maybe we should read one of the girls' poems.
Okay, I can do that. This is a poem. We read it on Palm Sunday. I'll stand and read it. We read it on Palm Sunday because it's about resurrection. This is by Eileen. She was my most difficult student. She threw a rock at my head. I told Daniel that. She threw a rock at my head. and didn't speak to me for most of the time that I taught her. And then when the class was over, she handed me this poem that was folded up into little squares. And she said, "Can you see me?" She said, here's my poem, Mister. That's how they called me there. Mister. Here is my poem. Don't change a word. If you're gonna print it, you have to print it exactly like this. I said, okay, I will. And it was one of those times, if you teach, like Anna teaches, you know that mystical moment when all the kids have left and it's quiet? You know that moment? Yeah. And it's kind of sacred. It's almost like a church moment. And you're just given everything you've got, and you don't know where it's going to land. And then after I read this, I was like, oh my God. This kid was listening the whole time, you know, with her head down on the desk, making fun of me every single class, not speaking to me. So the poem is called Counting. Eileen, age 15. She's now studying to be an attorney, and she's still at the home. We have residential apartments for people that have girls that have graduated. There's still a place for them to stay, a bridge program where they can continue to go to school, because the home becomes their whole life. It's all they've got. Counting. Every week, every day, every hour, every minute, and every second that I pass without my family, it feels like a knife trying to get inside a rock. I am the knife, and the rock is my life. So, this is me, Eileen, and this is my difficult life without my family. Some people think that living in a home for girls like our little roses, nuestras pequeñas rosas, is a big blessing. Yes, I say to those people, it is a great blessing, but at the same time, it is a curse. Every night, I start thinking and talking to God in my prayers. Why, God? Why did my family leave me alone? There is no answer. A lot of people see me with my sisters and my aunt, who's not really my aunt. And they think we are a happy group, but really all of us think the same thing that no one ever says. One day will our mother come to visit us. It is ugly to know that everyone in this school is celebrating Mother's Day. On this day, I feel ashamed to be me. But, God, listen to this. I am counting time like people count stars, and I will keep counting until my mother comes. My sisters are graduating, and soon I will go to college too. When I graduate from college and when I am finally somebody in this world, God, I will go straight to Mexico, where my mother lives, and I will stare at her like I stare at the stars, and with a voice that cracks like thunder, I will say, I forgive you. But for now, God, I am here in our little roses, counting. So that's what poetry can do. Do you want to take questions? Yeah, if there are other questions from the group. Anybody got any thoughts? Or yes, Patty Ford.
I'm listening to, and you're saying the poetry is forever and it doesn't require anything.
Oh, they just need you to speak into that for the people that are on the.
Okay, didn't realize getting mic. One of the things I love about your poetry is you said that it doesn't cost anything to do it. It merely is a paper and pencil. It's write on the notes on your phone, what have you. But it reminded me of something that I just saw recently. I just saw End Juliet last week on Broadway. And the Bard is one of the performers in this play, because his wife says, why do you always have tragic endings? Let's make something happy. And they talk about storytelling and how storytelling is so important. and you think about all the different nationalities that have held storytelling so close to their hearts. And then you were talking about during the Russian situation where they would talk about the weather and so it's a wonderful way that verbal ability to share your thoughts and to have reflection on what is going on in the world, in your own little sphere and then in the world at large. So I thank you.
You're welcome. You know, I have a spiritual advisor. I'm somebody that needs adult supervision. And one of the things that she often stresses with me is the importance of a creative outlet, and that everybody can have a creative outlet. And I really think that's how the Holy Spirit can move through anybody, whether you're going to church or not church, or you don't have to be Picasso, but everybody has the ability, the human has the ability, we crave it, a lot of us lose it for whatever reason. But we can all create something. John can take photographs. Dr. Sue can do so many things. The booklets for the sermons, among many other things. Posters. Andrew can do something. We all have creativity. Something inside that we can, and it gives us peace when we do it with our busy lives. Isn't it giving you peace to paint these paintings? And I want peace. I don't know about all of you, but more than anything, when I put my head on that pillow, I want peace. And it's a busy life for me, and so I paint pictures, which they're not it's not like the poetry where I'm, just a merciless perfectionist. It's more just, I just do it, and I have so much fun, and it helps me at work. And if I get too busy, my spiritual advisor will say, have you painted a painting yet? Have you done, when I'm getting all anxious about something, so.
Is there another question? Oh, lots.
Yes, you.
Hi, I'm Terry.
Hi, Terry.
And I'm wondering.
Does she need the mic? I think it's just for people that are.
On the Zoom. We have a lot of people on the Zoom.
Hi, Zoom people. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Hi again, I'm still Terry, and I'm wondering, other than financial contributions, which are always wonderful, what other opportunities are there to contribute to the Little Roses community?
Oh, yeah, sure. You can go home tonight and pray for them. You can go on your computer and type in Our Little Roses and look at a beautiful website that we made. You can write letters to them. You can or you can, sponsor one of them, and then at our church we sponsor 27 of these girls, and we're going there in another 2 weeks. Both Andrew, 29, Andrew and Dr. Sue sponsor girls that I will go there soon and give them their greetings and bring them stuff from them. And so even just, praying and finding out about it and watching the film or sharing that with somebody. Asking about it like you're doing right now, it all. I feel like an unlikely representative for that particular ministry. It just feels completely unlikely. And the sermon I'm preaching this weekend concerns Here I Am and Isaiah and the burnt coal on the lips, that wild and crazy reading. But it's also, just 2 weeks ago, Arthur Blessitt died. Do you know anybody know Arthur Blessitt? That was his real last name. And he was kind of crazy and Forrest Gump-like. And he just died 2 weeks ago. He was 84. And he fashioned himself a cross, this 12-foot cross with a wheel on the end of it, and decided to go, God told him to go all around the world with this cross. He spent 50 years going around the world with this cross. And what's the point of that? There was a point.
Unlikely.
Oh, unlikely. Okay, so he says in the documentary, if you watch it with him, that he feels like, he's like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. Like, I'm the last person to do this. Like, I'm not athletic. I don't speak other languages. I had a brain aneurysm before I started walking. He's like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. And he spent his whole life doing something that he didn't even know why he was doing it. And when I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, that's just like Our Little Roses, because, I don't know, 72 girls, but it's just super important. Yeah.
Hi, thank you.
Daniel, yeah.
So everything that you've done, we talked about earlier, is deeply personally important to me for reasons long ago in my life that have now been resurrected since I watched the film. And I wonder, knowing now that you have all this experience as a priest after living your 9 lives, so to speak,
Yeah.
where and how, for you, on a regular basis, do God and poetry come together? When is that, and how is that for you, where those two intersect?
Well, I don't know if I know. I mean, just reading it, sharing it with you, having this night with all of you that people I've never seen before, and coming down and talking about all these things, and connecting to people, and I mean, it's been a vehicle. I did not realize when Louise Glick called and I had won this prize that it would turn into all of these things. I mean, I was working in retail at Brooks Brothers. It was when John met me, that was my job. And so from that, via poetry I became an Episcopal priest. Some of my friends were like, "You're going to do what?" But then they were like, but even the art, super non-churchy people were like, "Oh no, I can see that. This is going to work." So, and that it would lead to, these girls being recognized. It would lead to this old homosexual who worked at Brooks Brothers in the Mall of America being, just recognized around the world when that poem ran in the New Yorker. And then they made a film out of that with James Franco. And so this whole thing happened to him via that poem. I mean, that seems kind of godlike. The whole thing seems like unexplainable, but fun, and I just wanted to spread love. So I think that's what the poetry is about. You were asking me earlier, and this focusing on people that are not seen, or something that's not seen. The poem I'm working on now, which Dr. Sue and Andrew know, is dedicated to Dr. Sue, and it's addressed to Andrew, and it's a poem in the voice of the house that I live in, which was probably a station house during the Underground Railroad. It's from 1798. I thought, wouldn't that be cool if the house talks? But part of it gets back to this idea that we first touched on, that when I moved to this parish and I heard about the issues that had gone down, and every parish has issues that have gone down, the rectory had been kind of more or less abandoned for 20 years, and the rectors lived far away. And I said, I don't know where it came from, but I said, if I come here, I got to live in that house. Somehow I thought that the rector needed to live in the rectory. I don't know why I thought that. but that would be part of somehow integral to the healing, that the people knew that I sat on it like a hen. I lived right next door to it. That was part of why priests lived nearby, and that it was important that they physically lived nearby. So the poem I'm working on is this long poem in the voice of the house. Another thing that my point is not seen, abandoned. No, people don't think, oh, you know, who cares about this house? But the house is like the old homosexual, like the girls in Honduras. It's like this magical thing. And I'm drawn to these things that for whatever reason people are not recognizing.
Thank you. You brought me joy, and I think that everything
You brought me joy. We have to get together.
that you are experiencing, that you just described, is God's way of saying, I am super pleased with you.
And it's all interconnected.
It is.
Yeah, listen to her. Yeah.
You often have a way of weaving poetry into many of your homilies, so that the laity, people like me who know nothing about poetry, are sort of gently exposed to it, and occasionally light bulbs go off. That's one of your gifts. I think to follow up where God and poetry sort of meet, and just to follow up as well, when did one of the leading salesmen at Brooks Brothers, who grew up with non-religious parents, all of a sudden wake up and say, Episcopal Seminary is for me?
When did that happen?
When did the light bulb go off and you knew you were called to the priesthood?
Oh, that's Andrew's the senior warden. You know the senior warden. You have a senior warden, right? Best senior warden. I love you.
Ditto.
You know, right, Matt? If you've got the support, you can do anything. Okay, so my call came slowly over time in little pieces, I would say. Part of it has to do with getting sober, and sitting in those folding chairs for now going on 39 years. And that happened through a tragedy. My cousin, we were the same age, was also a flawless alcoholic, and he was murdered when I graduated from Wesleyan. And this event was so bizarre and tragic, it kind of I began to think about religious things then. And then when I was in sales at Brooks Brothers, and another preposterous thing had happened, that Louise Glick had called my apartment where John Crowley visited me in Lantana, Florida, this little apartment, and I had won this thing, and I couldn't believe that I had won this thing. I had tried to get my first book of poems published 300 times over 15 years, and I thought you had to know somebody. I thought you had to be, and I didn't know anybody. I didn't get an MFA. I didn't know anybody, and once that had happened, I stayed in Brooks Brothers 5 more years. My first reading was at the Library of Congress. I had to ask for a special dispensation from Brooks to get off to go, because you couldn't take that many days off together on the sales floor. And I was volunteering at hospice, and I was reading poems to the patients. And I went from one room to the next one day, and I thought, so I was doing this because I had a little more time, because I had a Guggenheim grant, and still working at Brooks Brothers, and I thought, oh yeah, that's right. When I was young, I had thought that I wanted to be a priest, but I didn't do it. Now, why didn't I do it? Is it too late? Can you be a gay man and do? I mean, I'm still asking myself this question in 2000 and whatever it is. I don't even think they ask the question anymore, but I had just come out of such a background that was a big thing, and I didn't know if you could be gay and be a priest. So what I thought about it then, the church I was attending, I was in the back row. I didn't pledge. I wasn't part of any group. I was the first out the door. I didn't go to coffee hour. And that person went to the office of the parish and said, I think, is it possible that I could be a priest? And they said, I think that maybe, yeah. So that started it. That started it in Florida. And the bizarrest part of that story is that priest grew up in Wickford, Rhode Island, in the rectory. And the church sponsored him. And
That's incredible.
That's bizarro, but yeah. Is there a Zoom person?
Yes, we have a friend joining us online, currently identified as iPad, but I'm sure she has a name. Oh, poor kid, she's scrambling for the keyboard. Here's the question, and we'll get to the name later if that's important. We each try to express who we are, each facet so that we can be completely understood. It seems that we can't convey our totality. How do we tell each other what we know of each other? Sorry, how do we tell each other that what we know of each other is enough?
Can you read it again?
Yes, and this is Katie.
Katie?
Yes. So Katie's question is, we try to express who we are, each facet, so that we can be completely understood, but it seems that we can't convey our totality.
Yeah.
So the question is this: how do we tell each other that what we know of each other is enough?
By being non-judgmental and respectful and listening. I mean, there just isn't enough listening in the world, right? Everybody's got, the phone's one, right? Everybody's got one. And I think listening is really, really powerful. I mean, I think that is, I stole from Jesus Christ. I mean, he's like this incredible listener. His longest moment with anybody in the Bible with the Samaritan woman at the well, if you go back and you look at that long conversation, what is he doing? Louder?
Listening.
So, you know, I could listen more and listen better and want to listen more and listen better. And I think maybe that's the power of poetry too, is that it's listening. It's an art of listening. And
Sound and music.
Yeah.
But are there more questions in the room? And how are we on time? Can I have a time check?
7:37.
Oh, we're okay.
Hi, I'm Lauren.
Hi, Lauren.
Really enjoying this tonight. I wanted to just comment that poetry recently, in the last few years for me, has become almost like prayer.
Yes.
Where, and what we do here at Trinity, we do Christian contemplative prayer.
Oh, good.
And I have to say that it has just been a wonderful experience to take it home and experience it as prayer. I feel the divine is there, going back to Daniel's connection. And I just wondered if that is something that you've done with your own poems or other poems, and that they become prayer-like.
Well, some of it's, you know, what is it? Necessity is the
Mother of invention.
invention. So I'm a one-man band in Wickford, without, you know, no complaints, but I'm a one-man band. And so when we get to Holy Week, there's, as Matt knows, there's a bunch of stuff that happens. And so one thing creatively that we have done is insert one of my poems for, which service is that? Remember? No. I preach, and I take one by George Herbert, who's a real hero of mine, and insert that instead of 6 sermons by Father Spencer, which would be a lot. So we have these moments where there's poems instead of a sermon. And that was a suggestion of my bishop. It was from me, but it was a great suggestion. And so I think that's kind of working. So, yeah.
You know, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I don't think you've actually read one of your poems tonight, have you? You read a translation of Saruda.
Well, you know, us Reeses are extremely self-effacing.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can't let you go without reading at least one.
Okay, I'll close with what, do you want to take one more question or something like that?
Yeah.
Do
Sure. Another
Is there
question?
some,
Sure, and as I
Oh, you have a
mosey
question.
to our asker, I will just say, as someone for whom holy envy is real,
Holy
so-
what?
Holy envy.
Holy envy?
I'm so grateful your church is far enough away that people won't leave here.
They're not going to do that. Don't you love him? You are
doing
so
good.
lucky to have him. You are so lucky to have him. There's like, I don't know, like 5 priests that I just think the world of, and this guy is one of them. You're just so lucky to have him. I love him.
Did you have a question?
Do you have a question, Matt?
I do actually.
Oh, okay.
I guess for me, I was thinking about just the incredible gift of landing at FSG to be able to publish through there, and thinking of O'Connor. And I love Flannery O'Connor's description of writing as having the courage to stare at the awkward thing.
Oh yeah, she's
Right.
great. If you haven't read her,
To find those places that aren't getting much attention. And I think about the fact that I was not equipped, I don't think any of us is, to have a slot machine in our pocket all the time, in a time in which the competition for attention and what is worthy of our attention, how do you receive what you were given to stare at and contemplate and focus on with your attention, which you so beautifully dedicate to the margins? What might be a transferable practice for you? How do you choose what's worthy of your attention and time? Or how does that choose you?
I think it's organic. Like, I mean, I don't think I came to Wickford and said I'm going to write this poem about a house, or that it's going to be addressed to Andrew, who's a funeral director. I've never had a funeral director in my life as my dear friend, and that whole world of how he handles that, and it's fascinating to me. And so I think that the stuff picks you, that you don't pick it. I mean, I don't really think Dr. Sue will tell you, I didn't pick St. Paul's, Wickford, Rhode Island. It picked me out of a series of very strange circumstances. And all my priest jobs have been like that. Honduras and Madrid and Jackson Heights, and the stuff picks me. And either I can choose to pay attention to it or not. And that's just being aware and meditating and praying and being like, what's coming at me today, and how can I get rid of my ego so I don't block it? How can I really, open myself up and listen? I think, which I work on. Yes, Mr. Crowley, we've traveled the world together, my dear friend.
It's been fun. But as a audience of your life,
Yeah.
and seeing what poem, what book has the murder of the person in Hartford Hospital, and it seems like from watching you that it's all inspiration and intuition. And I always love the story of you finding Christ in the orphanage of the Shores.
Yes, there was no question.
No, but is it in intuition and
I send all my poems to John.
through intuition, there's inspiration. So the inspiration of the murder in
The Hartford
Hartford
Hospital.
sent you to Honduras the first time.
Yes, it did.
And then that poem is in the book.
Yes.
Then, there's always inspiration, but then there's an intuition that goes with it that seems to build.
Yeah, you just kind of follow the signs, I guess, like Jesus. You just kind of lean into it, and it takes me a long time to write poems. The paintings come fast, but the poems can take 10 years or 15 years. The Clerk's Tale was a long, long time. Why don't I'll read two short things. Is
Yes.
that good? We'll
Great.
close with that. And then we'll have look at that. We'll have some fruit and cheese and crackers and Elaine, close to Eileen, yeah, has set that up. Thank you for doing that. I'll read this poem that John just referred to when I was working at Hartford Hospital, and a young boy died, and many young boys died in gang violence, and this did lead to eventually going to Honduras, and this opens the second book that I wrote, and then I'll close with a poem from the last poem in the book of Acts, which is in the voice of Mary Magdalene, who will be coming to us soon as we approach Easter, our most fabulous and first evangelist. I see you. Those mornings I traveled north on I-91, passing below the basalt cliff of East Rock, where elms discuss their genealogies. I was a chaplain at Hartford Hospital, took the Myers-Briggs with Sister Margaret, learned I was an I drawn to ease. In small group, I said, I do not like it, the way young black men die in the ER, shot, unrecognized, their gurneys stripped, their belongings cataloged and unclaimed. In the neonatal ICU, newborns breathed, blue, spider delicate in nests of tubes, a Sunday of themselves, their tissue purpled, their eyelids the film on old water in a well, their faces resigned in plastic attics, their skin mottled, mildewed wallpaper. It is correct to love even at the wrong time. On rounds, the newborns eyed me, each one like Orpheus in his dark hallway, saying, I knew I would find you. I knew I would lose you. And then, thank you, Mark, for this lovely evening. It's really been fun. Yeah, we'll continue.
We will.
Yeah. Maria Magdalena, that's how you'd say it in Spanish, and it's dedicated to Laura Garcia Lorca, who is the niece of Federico Garcia Lorca, who I got to know and who helped me with our literary festival that we did over there. And it's in the voice of Mary Magdalene. And I think that's all I need to say. Oh, it just has a tiny bit of Spanish in it, and it's mi país, tuve un país, and that means my country. Did I have a country? It's all you need to know. Oh, the other thing I can tell you is that parts of this poem are taken from a poem that Laura's father wrote. So her uncle was murdered by Franco's troops at the time of the Civil War. He was shot in Granada, and her father, the brother, wrote this poem about Federico that she found after he died. She gave it to me, which was such an honor for this Spanish woman to give me this poem that was dear to her. And I translated it, and then parts of that are in the poem. So that's going on underneath. Maria Magdalena. Everybody knows who she is, right? Yeah. I kept vigil, preferred shadows. When I spoke, a man interrupted me. Someone called me a bitch. The bird on the branch, then suddenly it's gone. I forgot your name. Yelled from a ditch. You've no idea what it was like. Occupied my sex, barely, but remember the rain? The tree in silence, but suddenly the wind. Some talked about the past. Whatever was the point of it all, I held on through such argument. Wish I winced less, but I was alone. The moon fondled me, was thrilled to be fondled. I ached in the arches of my feet. I was wrong about much. Believing I was alone, I lingered, planted a garden, hammered in stakes with names. We waited. God, did we wait. I washed cutlery to make a music, complicated the horizon like a lilac. No one noticed me. There it is again. No one noticed me, not really, which was a relief. A bird in the wind brings the memory of you back. Suddenly I see with the light of your eyes. My country, did I have a country? Mi país, tuve un país? Stupid to bank on belonging. I always knew that. I belonged to the Lord. People laughed when I said that. I no longer cared. When my nailed human was free, I left. Thank you.
That was wonderful. So, a few thank yous before we grab a glass of wine and have a chat with Spencer. Number one, I just want to thank Ethan and Elaine and Daniel and everybody who's helped put this evening on. We can't do it without you. It's always a pleasure to have that kind of support. But tonight, in this cold, wintry night, it's especially nice to have you guys leading us through this whole thing. So, thank you, thank you, thank you. I also want to mention that our next event is on March 1st. It's going to be led by Matthew Crosman, who is at Yale and is he's actually the director of the Life Worth Living course there, which is one of the most popular courses on campus. And we're going to have an introduction to that course on Saturday in the workshop. So you might want to mark your calendars from that. And gosh, I don't even know how to say thank you. It's just been such a wonderful evening. I mean, I can't imagine have had anything better than a couple hours with you. I'm glad that we recorded it too, so we can share it with everybody.
Thank you.
And so with that, I'm going to close out the evening as we always do with the blessing. May you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. May you be peaceful and at ease until we meet again. Good night, everybody.